Welcome to this special extended edition to mark our 50th In Conversation event. These events started at the beginning of COVID, and we've interviewed some wonderful craftspeople over the last few years, and none more so than tonight's guest, Zack Pinsent. Previous editions in this series are available on our brand new website. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do. It's been a lot of work, and Biz has done a huge amount, and we're very proud of it. This evening also celebrates our new partnership with the Costume Society to support UK fashion textile makers, and we'll have an exciting announcement at the end about our new Fashion Textile Maker of the Year award, which goes live for nominations on 24th of June. And we're delighted to be joined this evening by Natasha and Babette from the Costume Society. Yeah, we're absolutely honoured and delighted to be joined by Zack Pinsent, self-taught tailor and social media influencer, who ceremoniously burnt his last pair of jeans at the age of 14 and has not worn an article of modern clothing since. He operates Pinsent Tailoring in Brighton, crafting bespoke items reflecting the fashion of the late 17th through to the early 20th centuries, and shares his skills and passion with enthusiasts, students, and new audiences. Zack's here to talk about the craft that underpins his public profile, his love for tailoring rooted in history, and his hope for the next generation of makers. Hi, Zack, how are you?
Hello there. No, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So we'll get straight stuck in with the questions, but yeah, we might break to take some audience questions throughout the session. If you've got a question for Zack, please do type it in. So we'll go back to an element of the introduction. At the age of 14, it seemed to mark a transition for you, which is when you famously set fire to your modern clothes and embarked on a life in period clothing. But before we get to that point, could you tell us a little bit about what you were like as a child and what early opportunities you had, either at home or school, to express your creativity?
No, it's an interesting one. As a child, I was very exuberant. Well, very exuberant. So things haven't really changed. And as we know, every child loves dressing up, and I never really stopped, which sums that one up quite nicely. I was, you know, I was born 3 months premature, I was always a very small child, always the shortest in my year and everything, and because of that and other initial de developmental things, I started school a year later than everyone else. So I was the shortest, but the oldest. So that created some interesting challenges. I was very small and everything. You know, sport was scary and all of that sort of thing. But I was a huge fantasist. Loved reading. Loved history. When I was younger, we'd go to a National Trust property or to a castle or something. I would dress up naturally. No one else would, just me. Absolutely loving it. I'd always loved dressing up because it made me feel happy. So then when you grow up and you're told that you can't or you shouldn't, you're going, but this makes me happy. So it was an interesting decision later in life to rekindle that particular joy and really cement it, because I suppose if you're not enjoying the clothes that you're in, you're kind of missing the point. It's a wonderful option to have, and if you can change your whole outlook or feeling just through wearing something different, then go for it. I mean, really, you've got nothing stopping you. And with everything else that goes on in the world, if clothing can make you happy, then I think that's a good change that you can try and make.
Exactly, and people aren't so utilitarian about their eating and their food. We readily understand that we eat for pleasure as well as for sustenance. So we should probably have the same attitude towards clothes as well, shouldn't we?
Well, exactly, especially when people take and that leads into sustainability, where you have people are very obsessive about what they eat and the way it eats and impacts their body, but won't give a second thought about what they're wearing, in terms of how it's made, ethically produced, or even stylistically. So it's this thing of, oh, I have a friend who's vegan and everything and won't wear leather. So she says, "Oh, it's pleather." No, 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 it's plastic. And then there's the problem with that, and saying, "So what are you doing for the environment on that side of things?" You need to look at everything holistically, very much the body as a whole, as opposed to picking out different bits. But then again, it really comes down to personal choice, and that's what all of this comes down to. It is a case of choice where you can pick and decide what you want to wear, eat, where you want to live, things like that. We live in a comparatively very free society, so vive la différence, really.
So, as well as being an exuberant dresser-upper as a child, did that translate into other creative activities? Were you artistic?
Oh, certainly. I couldn't draw for the life of me, and that was part of the thing that sort of held me back from doing classical art and things. Because if you can't draw this properly and that properly, you're never going to, it was always drummed into you. But I was always very exuberant, and what really, well, so loved school plays, loved that sort of thing. I loved singing, and then I went on to do opera at Glyndebourne, and things there. But the thing that really turned it around for me was when in year 9, which my school called Shell, bizarrely, we did a recycled fashion course, and everyone grouped up into teams. And I didn't really have any friends, so I thought, well, I'll just do it by myself. So I did, and rather than hot gluing CDs onto a sort of plastic bag, I was finding vintage clothes and things like that, cutting them up, hand sewing them together, trying to sort of emulate and create something interesting, which I did, and I loved it. And it was a real sense of excitement being able to turn these otherwise unwanted garments and things into just the most bizarre, crazy, out there designs, which really was incredibly exhilarating.
Well, that must have been not long before that moment at age 14, you made that decision to make the
It
transition to historical costume.
exactly, it was one of those sort of nexus things, and it was right in the middle of us moving house, which is why we ended up going through the loft and finding my great grandfather's suits, which fitted me like a glove. And what was wonderful is I was like, right, well, that's the perfect base to go from. And the rest is history, really. Yeah.
And were you supported by your family in this decision? What did they think?
Oh, very much so. We've always been we're a we're a family of just individuals, and I think all families are families of individuals. But my it's funny because my dad says that he was the black sheep of his family, but he's the most normal one in ours. so so it's quite an interesting thing. And no, they're always very supportive, in terms of going, well, that's just Zack, which is really the basis of support, is being there and not being judgmental, which is the basis of support if you're looking and wondering how to support someone in something, and sort of allowing me to have breathing room to try out these things and work through bizarre fashion choices or bizarre phases or whatever you might be going through. It's a very, very important developmental thing to help someone, especially at that really tricky part of a teenager's life. You're going through puberty, you're having the hardest exams you'll ever sit, and everything all happening at the same sort of time. It's really not a nice time, and there's no amount of money you could pay me to sort of relive any of it.
No, but very much appreciating that level of acceptance and support. I think that's really
Oh,
important.
certainly.
So a very broad question then. What inspires you most about historical fashion, and is there a particular era or style that you're most passionate about?
I think one of the main aspects of historical clothing that inspired me the most has got to be the elegance of it and the conscious aspect of dressing. The fact that you are trying to communicate something, or you're working with something, and the use of color, pattern, and style, which you just don't see now. We are living in the most monochrome uh, era nowadays. Everything is incredibly bland, and that is such a shame. It really really is. I mean, the pendulum has swung around throughout history, but we are living in the least colourful times when it comes to clothing, especially men's clothing. You look at what's available and you just think it's all a bit of a shame. And that was part of it growing up. I'd be walking around Brighton and I'd just see everyone the same, and at school, whenever it was, people who were in their own clothes and stuff, it was all the same. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't right for me, and I just didn't like it. And what I did like was dressing differently. And the good thing about historical is that it gives you a real appreciation of now. And after all, clothing is social history, and social history is a story of us, which is completely fascinating. So when organizations, museums, and whatnot, and society, they poo-poo fashion history or clothing, and just say, "Oh, it's just clothes." It's never been just clothes. It's because for most of history, things have been made bespoke, whether you were rich, poor, free, or enslaved. Everything was still made for you, but in terms of choice, that's a different matter. And it really is fascinating deciding and working out sort of what choices people had and made, and realizing that as people now, there were people then that simply had no taste. Um, and that's why there are some things that survive where you're thinking, how did that survive? Because no one wanted to wear it. Like the thing was made and it was just poor taste, so it never really caught on. Um, so I think I think that's particularly interesting. But I think mainly era wise for me, it would be the Regency, simply
Hmm.
because the early 19th century, because you've got once again, it's a transitional period. We are coming from the wealth of the 18th century into the more enlightened scientific era, as it were. Um, and to do any earlier periods involves wigs, which are great, but a lot for every day, which if I were to do it properly, I'd have to do it properly. And you can see why these things took so much time and energy, because it was all about filling your time, mainly. So I think the early 19th century is sort of the closest you can get. And the Victorian period, bits and pieces of it I love. But after all, I'm not going to. Well, I first started wearing sort of original 20s, 30s, and Edwardian and Victorian pieces. So started off doing that, because it was something that I could access. There were things in charity shops and vintage clothes shops and things that I could wear and put together, and all of that, and create my own look from that, especially using my great grandfather's suits as a nice base to then put waistcoats or trousers or hats with. But then when it came the ability, well, and then it was through repairing linings or duplicating something where I was like, oh, actually, I can try and make some of this. And once you can make something, everything opens up. Everything opens up, and you kind of go, why did I waste all this time not doing this other thing, not dressing in this particular way, or why was I so miserable doing this? So it's an interesting path. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting what you say about eras kind of oscillating between very elaborate clothing to very plain. And I think, yeah, maybe in the 1980s with the skinheads and the new romantics, we had that kind of the punk look, and it's probably not come back since.
Mm-hmm.
Partly that's probably due to global consumerism and fast fashion. We're all being homogenized according to the market. But yeah, nice to see resistance to that in whatever form it takes. So I was going, yeah, you mentioned about kind of starting to mend and alter the clothing that you found. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the craft skills that you developed to become a tailor. What was that journey like? Did you get training? Were you self-taught? Did you do courses? What happened?
So unfortunately, well, so I started off wanting to do fashion or something, and talked with the school about it, and they said, "Well, you haven't got the art degrees and things that you'd need for that." So I was going, "Oh, okay." So I thought, well, what can I do that's close but academic? And I settled on history of art. So I studied that for a couple of years at university, but uh, I dropped out because the course wasn't what I wanted, and there were and I was thinking, I'm not to say I'm not learning anything was not quite right, but in terms of I wasn't learning what I expected to be learning, or what, well, in fact, none of us were, and yeah, and there was a bit of a thing around that, but that's a whole other story. So I then land, and I'm like, right, what do I do with myself? I can't afford to do another degree. And during this time, spare time, I'd been making bits and bobs myself. And then I had a friend come up to me and say, "Could you make me something?" I was like, "Okay, fine." And that was the first process of, okay, let's see about this. Um, and and I made my first commissions, and I thought, wow, this is great. And once again, it was family support, so setting things up in a partition of the lounge, setting up a station there, working away on things, um, and it was getting bigger and bigger. But I really wasn't making any money, and a lot of it was just researching, working out how on earth I do this. I was looking into tailoring courses I could apply to, but it was all modern suits, modern suits, modern suits, and nothing was based. And there were ones looking at theatre costume, but I didn't want theatre costume. I wanted, how is the stuff made? What's the like? Why, when I buy a pattern online, why does it not look like an original garment? What is the missing piece? And the missing piece was hundreds and thousands worth of hours at various libraries, museums, looking at extant garments in archives, and then beginning to collect pieces. So it's really become, you know, being self-taught. It's very much been a tricky journey, um, but really, it's been a delightful one. It's and it does breed in you this sense of um, imposter syndrome as well, because up until recently I didn't really know any tailors, and I wanted to go on Savile Row, and I tried to, and there was this whole thing of, oh, that's not possible because you haven't had done this degree or you don't have experience in this, so I was battered away. Um, so I was like, oh, what do I do? And now recently, I've actually teamed up with a whole new group of friends called Quailers, which stands for Queer Tailors, and started on Savile Row, and it combines sort of queer tailors and their allies, all very youth based as well, which is quite nice. And it's a wonderful way for us all to connect. And what's wonderful is that hearing from these 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 people in the tailoring industry who actually go, oh wow, you do that, I couldn't do that. And it's like, well, similarly, you do stuff I couldn't do. And after all, we're all just in love with the craft, and we're all constantly learning. I was talking to um, a tailor who used to cut for Burberry, and he was in his mid late 80s, and he was talking to me, and he had been tailoring originally from Italy since like the age of 12. So he's had a long history of being able to work with certain crafts and things. And it was fascinating talking to him. And I was talking to him about my method and how I learnt. And he said, well, he had no formal training to begin with. And then it was working in tailor shops and things like that in Italy. And I was telling him about some of the techniques and things that I use, and he was going, "No one does this anymore. No one does that anymore." And it's like, well, I actually do that, you know. So it was particularly interesting, you know, crossing that bridge between that even with tailoring over the past, you know, few decades is different in a way to tailoring now, unless it's something you're specifically looking for or wondering about. Because after all, tailoring can also be specific to different skill sets and things, and also what's in fashion. So yes, and I think I've totally rambled away from the origin of the question, but there we go.
No,
You'll find me doing that.
I think it's extraordinary that you've managed to attain such high level of craft skills just through self teaching. It's fantastic. Do you think that speaks to an underlying inclination to be a crafts person? Do you think if you had taken a different route, that would have manifested in a different way?
Oh, certainly, certainly. I was a Lego lover growing up. Loved putting them together, taking them apart. Loved, well, I mean, as we started the thing, loved taking apart and putting back together clocks. Uh,
Really?
that that was something that I did a little bit of very casual horology on sort of charity shop type clocks. Well, actually, that one was my great grandmother's, which had never been working until I fiddled with it and got it working again. So I proudly have that one going. It's still becoming a bit of a task to have it keeping going when my fiance's here,
Mhm.
because like I can't sleep through it. He's just not used to it. But because he grew up in the countryside in Massachusetts by the sea,
Yeah.
so not really the countryside, but not in a town. So it was very quiet. So it was actually a bit of a sensory weird deprivation thing when I went to his parents' uh, place to meet the family for the first time, and it was just so quiet. And I was like, I can't sleep. It's like, why? I need something. So I suppose that's interesting. But no, I really think my creativity would have come out in other ways. And you see this all the time. You see it all the time with people who were creative souls who then went into an industry which isn't designed for creatives, for example, like banking, and it'll come out in different ways. Which you know, it'll come out in all sorts of different ways in terms of creativity. But in terms of craft, the thing that sort of grinds my gears slightly when people talk about craft, people say, "Oh, craft," and people sort of go, "Oh, it's all cutesy," and they don't really take it seriously.
Mhm.
But then on the flip side, people will admire paintings and things and all of this. It's like, yes, you admire the thing, you admire the end product, so admire the people that make it. And people say, "Oh, you're so talented." Talent has nothing to do with it. Talent has nothing to do with any of this. It's all skill. It's all learnt. It's all striven for. Because I didn't wake up being able to, you know, draft bridges. I wish I had. That would make things a lot easier.
Well, you're definitely speaking our language there. Yeah, we support craft in all its aspects, whether that's as a career or yeah, for people that are working in non-creative sectors. As you say, it makes itself known in other ways. So along those lines, at what period did you realize that period tailoring could be a career rather than just a special interest? You mentioned making money. Where did that
Mm.
come in?
So it was always very sort of casual, sort of making bits and bobs for people, trying to sort of get my name out there. Um, and because of the wonders of social media, then you know, the BBC got in touch with stuff, and a couple of documentary sort of things happened, and it kind of flew from there to the point where I'm going, wow. I mean, yes, I'm working all the time. It's being a creative is very feast and famine. Um, and it's yes, so having that sort of switch was really when I was thinking, oh gosh, I'm actually booked out for a year. I physically won't be able to make more things this year. So that's really when I thought, oh goodness, this can be a career. And it kind of went from there in terms of, and it was also that really tricky, daunting step to up my prices. Um, Simply in terms of in line with the fact that inflation exists and the fact that things take a very long time. And it's important to be conscious and aware of that, and price yourself accordingly. Because after all, if you said to someone that works in really any other sector, hello, could you dedicate 3 months of your life to this one task for about this much money? Go, no, that's insane. So why for the world of craft when you actually have something tangible at the end of it? Um, it's like, behold my life's work. It's a digital folder of spreadsheets. Rather than I can sort of say, oh, well, the most amazing thing happened. Well, because I had a book. See, told you I'd ramble. But I think the same is for all craft people. We mainly because we're generally working by ourselves.
Hmm.
So we do that thing of, oh my goodness, human contact, and then we just splurge on people. And the most amazing thing happened, and it was kind of a full circle moment, which I was kind of didn't dawn on me in the moment, and then it did, and I was like, oh my goodness. So at the ball I recently held in Brighton Pavilion, which was amazing, and I did get posted, woohoo. I had the person, well, I had my first customer there. My first client was there, and I made his wedding suit. So he wore his wedding suit, and then the most recent thing I'd made was an outfit for my then boyfriend. So I had my first garment and my latest garment there, kind of bookending each other. And it was a bit weirdly emotional going, I made that and I made that. And it was a really indescribable sense of, no, it's a very indescribable feeling. It's, a real sense of achievement and pride, certainly, but also just, oh gosh, and also going, oh yeah, it still holds together quite well. I mean, it's not terrible, and I remember I did years later, I think, end up sort of altering bits on it or something, but it was fascinating, and it was really, yeah, really amazing.
Yeah, a proper encapsulation of a journey that
Yeah,
incorporates a lot of kind of striving and learning and emotion. Yeah, I can imagine how that kind of all came to a head.
I mean, if it were a film, that would be kind of like a closing scene or
Yeah,
something. It's like,
yeah,
oh, there it is, the end of it all, and then, you know, but maybe it's the universe saying we just totally changed paths now.
yeah, yeah. Talking about film, I was going to say when you were saying about the Regency period, there was a very apt edition of a Doctor Who on Saturday. I don't know if you caught
Yes,
it.
I haven't watched it. Because I just haven't had a chance. Um, but no, it's on the watch list.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
there we go.
Uh, no, it's on the watch list, and I've seen some photos from it, and I'm just so pleased. I'm so
Yeah,
pleased. It's
yeah.
great, because it's such an elegant and fantastic period for dress, for men's dress especially,
Hmm.
um, which is particularly lovely. Yeah,
I think you'll enjoy it. So I can see some questions are coming into the chat. So I'm going to introduce my fantastic colleague Biz, who's going to
sure.
pull out some of the questions.
Hello, fabulous conversation. Just not gonna lie, super fans. So when
Oh
I
hi.
heard from Daniel that it was like, oh, Zach Pinsent's gonna be in our own conversation, I'm like, really? Are you serious? So I'm just fangirling in the background, so nonchalant. I'm very happy.
Oh bless you. Oh
For someone who cried when she was forced to wear her first pair of jeans at 12, I completely relate. So anyway, I'll have questions that I can throw in the backhand, but we do have some fabulous questions from our audience, as well as lovely comments. So do everyone go into the comments and just read some of the lovely statements. And there's some great charities people have been putting on there. But question-wise, first one, which I think is a fabulous, fun question. If you could raid a wardrobe of one, any historical figure in history, who would it be and why? I know that's really hard.
That's really hard. It's got to be George the Fourth.
Amazing.
It's got to be George the Fourth. But it's going to have to be at different parts of his life. Because I've looked at the tailor's directory when George IV came in to have a waistcoat altered, and it says in the thing padding removed, aka he's just outgrowing the padding they put into it. And I'm going, yes. But things like his light dragoon uniforms and things, just swoon worthy, absolutely spectacular. Yeah, wonderful wardrobe. And people, I will stand up for George IV here, because people say, oh, he was just a fat king, da, da, da. It's like, yeah, but so much more than that. And also, do we treat people nowadays like fat people are just the fact they're fat? No. Did he eat a lot and everything? Yes. But he also, was just struggled with all sorts of health problems and whatnot. But without him, Brighton wouldn't exist as it does. And the Royal Collection would not be a thing, because he really built the Royal Collection. When Europe is collapsing, he's going, oh no, yes, of course you can, come over here, oh nobles that are being, driven out by revolution, and Napoleon and everything. And, I'll just buy your old paintings. So that's why we have the astonishing collection that we do now. And did he bankrupt the crown a couple of times? Yeah. But it meant that we hadn't really had to spend much on anything since then, realistically. I mean, it's like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to fill this palace with? Oh, we have something in storage that George IV undoubtedly got. So that's particularly interesting. And he was a real patron to artists, writers. Jane Austen. He funded Jane Austen, for goodness sake. So, and I think people are very quick to kind of forget that. That he was our patron and everything, and that's a big deal. And we've got a lot to thank him for in sort of really helping build a cultural identity, and a real sense of material culture, and giving us such a wonderful wealth of things in our national collections.
I don't think I really appreciate that. I now need to do some searching myself to see his collection and what his eye was. That's fascinating. Very cool.
And also a very nuanced individual. Very, most likely by, or at least kind of like, because that the Victorians ruined everything, which if it's not a book, it should be a book and it should be mine. And it's like the Victorians ruined everything. My continuous rant on the Victorians ruining everything. Everything was a little bit more fluid, in certain ways and in parts of society. And George IV was such an interesting character. I mean, was he perfect? No, of course not. No one ever is. Least of all people born in the 18th century. So, pinch of salt and all that.
Fair. I think there's plenty of people, both in the past and present, which always pinch of salt. We have maybe an easy question. Quick one would be, where do you source your fabric?
Well, you'd think it's an easy question. 'Tis not. So all over the place. There is no one-stop shop. Everything is 100% natural fiber. So I use cloth and fabrics that are sort of reproductions or were available, if that makes sense. So I order pretty much everything I can from the UK and Europe, which has now become much more expensive than it used to be. I wonder why. And then there are things that I do order from India and China, which historically were made or produced in India and China. So, for example, Nankin, or things that are China blue, things like that, but then also Indian fabrics, block prints, and those sorts of things. Well, I'm going to get them from companies that have been in production for the past, X hundred years or something. Because luckily, I think in a way, because of our military, we still produce some of the finest cloth, because we need it for various things. So all sorts of places. And after all, silk taffeta is silk taffeta. Hasn't changed much. The only difference really between hand woven fabrics and machine made fabrics is the woven density. Handmade and hand woven fabrics are much denser than modern made fabrics, because a craftsperson can feel the tension, and it comes with knack. And that's something I'd love to work with. I'd love to be able to work with a hand woven fabric or something in something at some point. I mean, I have got some hand woven bits of linen, which I'm going to turn into a shirt project of hand making a shirt. Well, I'm going to do it two ways, because it's old hand woven fabric, probably from the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. I'm going to do a video on doing it two ways. One half completely hand sewn, the other half the modern sort of how you can sew it together with a machine, but still to emulate that. So it's a learning basis from both sides. You get both parts of the skill set, really. And that's something I've been planning to do for far too long. I just need to get around to it.
Fair. I'm eager to see that project, though. I think that's a really interesting one for people with different resources. And if they're trying to emulate your projects, having it in different accessible points is really nice. Coming on to that, I've got a couple questions kind of similar. In terms of historical clothing, people can be mean, especially teenagers, if someone's coming up and they want to either get into it and making them, or they want their wardrobe to reflect something like yours. How do you initially weather that? How do you kind of start both making out your wardrobe the way you want it to? And then if you want to start making as a historical seamstress and tailor, what tools would you suggest?
So as someone who kind of jumped into it, you have to realize that you don't matter. No one cares about you. Like, it sounds harsh, but it's actually bizarrely freeing, because no one cares about you. People have got their own lives. People are, you might not even be a second thought to them. So don't let them be a second thought to you. It's like, oh, what if people stare? What if people stare? I mean, what's that going to do? If they're not, I can't swear here, can I? If they're not, here we go. If they're not feeding, fornicating, or funding you, doesn't matter. Absolutely does not matter. We are stuck on this little blue marble swirling about amidst of black space. It doesn't matter. Their opinions on you are none of your business. Who are you to know what they think? That they're not allowed to know what you think. And if people say stuff, just pour them. The fact that they feel so intimidated, or something lacking, or something has clearly awoken something in them that they have to be like that. It's like, oh, okay, oh no, we're all gonna die, so just get on with it. Yeah.
I completely agree. And I remember, it's funny. I just vividly remember like feeling the exact same way when I was 18. Like, everyone's so focused on themselves and so insecure about whatever they're insecure about. They have no time to think about you in some ways. Like, it just is a freeing moment. In terms of then someone trying to get into the craft, be it a young person or you know, someone who went down a career path, it's not for them. They want to come out of it and pivot into something more around historical garments, be it creating them, you know, whatever that may be. What would you suggest in terms of, you know, resources, or if you could go back and help yourself, you know, going down this path, what would you want your younger self to know?
I think two things. Well, two or three. Okay, a few things. I'm just going to make a list. I'm not going to limit myself. Why should I? First off, do insanely well in a career, or marry someone rich. So yeah, that would be great. I should have done that, because that'll make it all easier. It's a particular. So doing it self-employed is one thing, but you know, going to a fashion house or a costume company, or something like that, or even vintage, or making your own things in certain ways, is a way to sort of get into the career in that way. And there are, I think things have shifted a little bit. Things are becoming a lot more accessible than I think they were when I was sort of trying to find ways and means to getting into things. And luckily, because of social media, you can reach out differently. And with things like Quailers, which is great because we've got people working in Savile Row, the Royal Opera House, Royal Ballet, you know, all over the place. That's a really good resource. And I had the huge pleasure of marching with Quailers at London Pride last year, which was fantastic. And I think they're currently looking for donations as well, because it's all volunteer done and whatnot. And there's just, you know, the admin stuff that has to be done. So you know, if you want to support, you know, young queer artists and tailors and whatnot, you'll be able to find them somewhere.
Links in the chat if anyone wanted. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, great. Fantastic. Wow. Okay. Getting into it is tricky. There's a lot of stuffy old white men involved in most industries, and but then you've got the flip side of stuffy old white catty gay men in the theatre and costume world. But those things are changing. There are lots of things changing. So basically, don't give up, because I didn't. And if you want to get into it, focus on in terms of building a wardrobe, certainly, focus on the foundation layers first. But because if you start doing the outer layers, you know, or coats and things, there's many more components of that to go wrong. And it also means that they won't hang right until the base layers are done. And it's also a really kind way of doing it for yourself, because a lot of foundation layer type stuff all ends up getting covered anyway. So if it's not the best work, it'll be covered by slightly better work, and going on and continuing that way. So it's just be patient with yourself, because you just got to just be patient.
I don't know how much time I have left for the Q. Can we? I've got one more, and then maybe you have a few more questions. We can bounce back and forth.
Yeah, do you want to do one more and then we'll come again to you in a bit?
Yeah. I have a question/comment from Charlotte V. As a queer maker, I love to hear of LGBT sewing communities like Quailers. LGBT history has many links with the act of craft. How do you find queerness intersects with your practice?
Well, everything I do, well, the good thing is that people are seeing my craft, people are seeing the side of it and going, oh wow, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's historical. And you know, people that are very into that from perhaps a far right side of things are going, oh, he's great, he's amazing. And they're like, oh, but he's gay. And it's like, so in some ways it's actually, you know, changed some people's minds. So they're going, oh, so you can do like traditional stuff, it's not all just drag and things. It's like, no, it's not. You know, queer and gay people are just people. And it's really getting that across, because a lot of that just comes from indoctrination through growing up. You know, it's not something that, you know, no one learns to be awful. You know, it's just kind of, well, no one's born awful. You know, people are taught it, sort of thing. And what's wonderful is that I've become very much a safe space for queer people in clothing construction, queer people full stop, people involved in self-expression, because what I'm doing is pure self-expression. It's camp. And as the late Vivian Westwood said to me, what I'm doing is punk. But because realistically, when you think about it, the whole notion of punk is going against the norm. And when punk sort of became everyday fashion in a way, it was like, well, then it's not punk anymore. It's kind of missing the point. So I found that really interesting and quite like, oh my God. So yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. And yeah, so I think I've become a safe space because I've had clients that are trans or people that are male or female presenting who wish to dress in a male or in an opposite presenting manner, and I've been able to help them do that, and just allow people to have fun with gender expression as well. You know, the joyous and annoying social construct that it is, and it's been really nice. And the wonderful thing is that when I put my ball on, there are people that had never gone or thought of going, or well, felt they couldn't go to a lot of historical events and things, because you look at photos of these things and it's lots of maybe much older people and predominantly white people as well. And there is a history of communities like that not being as accepting. And so it can be quite daunting. So I had lots of wonderful young people from the whole rainbow attend, which really was quite something and really changed the energy in the room to one of just absolute joy, because there are people thinking, oh, I didn't think I could ever go to something like this and have such an amazing time. And it was wonderful that people did. It was great.
That's fabulous. I'm so happy to hear that. Ooh, and my cat is too, apparently.
Fantastic.
I'll pass the mic back over to Danny, who's got probably a few more questions. And then everyone else, please feel free to keep putting wonderful comments or questions in. I'll keep an eye on them and we can get back to them towards the end of the session.
Yeah, the questions are fantastic. Do keep them coming. This is a special extended edition, so we'll be going on until 8:30 for those of you who can stick with us. So yeah, we'll have an opportunity to dip back into the questions. I wanted to ask you about how you balance the need for historical accuracy in your clothing with your own creative expression. Is that a conflict at all ever?
Not at all, no. But because actually, historical fashion is sort of the self-expression side of things, because it's like, oh, I just love it and I'm happy with it. And the good thing is that people think, oh, historical fashion, that must be quite restrictive. If anything, there's more options than there are now. And the good thing is, because it's fashion that's already happened, it's tried and tested, and you won't be like, you know, going, oh, is that a good look or was that a bad look? So you can look at it and go, I know it looks good. And what's fascinating is you look at some fabric samples and things, you just think, wow, they loved color. And you know what's more? That whole subtle pastel Pride and Prejudice look is completely made up. And you know, you one of my favorite things was looking through one of Ackerman's repositories, and for June 1807, fashionable waistcoat material for men, bright orange and black shag, so really thick, like old Stuyve teddy bear shag, so nice and thick, silk shag, bright orange, black polka dots, fashionable, you know, height of fashion. Everyone was wearing them. Don't see Mr. Darcy wearing that, do you? Like, it's got so much color, and because I make everything as well, there really isn't much of a balance thing. Well, when it comes to historical accuracy, some of it has to do with technique sometimes. So I do use a machine for some seams and everything, but that it still means that 90% of it is hand sewn, because things like the shoulders on a coat, you've got to do that by hand. But sleeve seams, you can do that by machine. And to test it, because I was thinking, what do? I hand sewed a seam, and I machine stitch seam, and on some makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. And they're just for like long seams, but any interfacings, linings, facings, all the internal construction, hundreds of hours worth on pad stitching and stuff. I mean, to do a collar, it takes, you know, almost a day, you know, to properly pad stitch, you know, a mid-regency collar, because of the way you've got to do it in order to make it sit right is interesting. And I do sometimes look at other tailors' videos and things on sort of YouTube or Instagram, and they're just flicking through the fabric, no problem. I'm going, I'm working with a very heavy wool here, you know, and they seem to make it look so easy. So, well, that's because they're working with something that is handkerchief weight almost. Because there is a huge fashion towards lighter and lighter weight suits, mainly because the earth is getting warmer, but also we have central heating, so we don't need to be as warm all the time as well. So in terms of historical accuracy, I think it would be occasionally using a machine, but apart from that, I try to stay as close to history as possible.
I suppose it's like any creative endeavor. If we set ourselves some parameters, that frees us up to be creative within those parameters. Like if you were writing a sonnet, because of that meter and structure, doesn't mean you can't be creative and express yourself within that structure.
Exactly. Haikus aren't boring.
Exactly.
Maybe that's a haiku. I don't know. I'll have to work that out. But haikus aren't boring, and it's that thing of when people say, "Oh, there's a dress code." Yeah, there's a dress code. It's now a challenge. It's now, but also it's helpful because you've then got a guide. You know, something to, you know, a direction with where you can be exuberant, which I think is great.
And yeah, so is there a kind of a halfway house? Can you see period tailoring influence and being relevant to modern fashion and tailoring?
Well, I think saying modern fashion is kind of bizarre because if anything, we're post fashion. We're kind of Dada-esque. You know, it's all happened. And I think the next wave is somehow technological clothing in some ways, I think. But fashion is, as Oscar Wilde said, fashion is such a ghastly thing you have to change it every 6 months. And I do feel a certain amount of that in terms of putting this together. And in terms of things you can learn from fashion, it's you can mix color, you can wear color, you can really enjoy the clothes you're in and don't take everything so seriously. You can wear materials that you wouldn't normally wear. But I think above all, the things that you can really learn and that can influence modern fashion is sustainability, looking after clothing. You know, the next piece of clothing you should buy, it should hurt your wallet. It should hurt your wallet because it needs to be well made from the right fabrics so that, you know, you think of things that people buy now. What's going to become the vintage of tomorrow? It's not well made enough. So buy some. If you're not willing to repair something, you shouldn't be buying it. So I think rather than going, oh, fashion, I want that, because fashion is moving faster than it has at any other period in history before, ever. Which on one side is like, woohoo, great, maybe, because it allows all sorts of access. But you look at the flip side and you look at the absolute ecological destruction it's causing. And that can't sit well with anyone. So I think one of the things that you can really learn from the past is, you know, there's a lot we can learn from the past about how to just live more sustainably, because they had to, because they didn't have the option of Amazon or just buying something new. They had to, you know, literally make do and mend.
Yes, and one of our great supporters, Patrick Grant from the Great British Sewing Bee, has got a book out about this topic at the moment.
Yes, you know, I need to pick up a copy. And yeah, I think he's great.
Yeah, I'll be spending the day with Patrick next Tuesday. We're going up to a secondary school in Bolton and talking to the kids about the importance of slow fashion and
I am
making.
very, very jealous.
Oh, you're more than welcome to join us. I'm sure you would be more than welcome. Oh, and also, we mentioned our back catalogue of In Conversation events. We've got one with Patrick on the website for those who want to go back and have a look at that. He was a very
Wonderful.
fun interviewee. So I was going to ask you about the type of people who commission your work. Is it from a very cohesive historical reenactment community, or is it wider than that? Is it from a broader spectrum of your customer base? What type of people are interested in commissioning things?
So it it's interesting. I get this question a fair bit, and it's changed. So it started off as people that were purely involved in reenacting because they were the people that I knew, um, and they had certain expectations and things. And then obviously once people started to see my stuff online, I I'm no longer surprised by who wants things, or who's interested, which is great. Um, but whole spectrum, absolute huge spectrum of people and individuals, from people wanting a full suit, so buying it bit by bit, to people saying, "Oh yeah, I want a full wardrobe," and I'm like, oh, "Okay." Um, so much to do, and you get people from all industries. Like interestingly, I had a banker guy, and he originally came in doing the whole sort of, I'm going to be very kind of formal, and dark suited because that's what he was used to. And I said, okay, well, what's your favorite color? Green. It's like, we can make you something green. And he was like, really? So in the end, we ended up going for a 1790s day and evening suit where it's a changeable waistcoat, um, in green wool with green death's head buttons lined in bright pink silk, um, because that was incredibly fashionable. Those color combinations, and it actually existed, but because there's a description of one coat exactly like that. So he was thrilled, and he felt, oh, this feels really good. I feel great. And it's like, see, like that aspect of just dressing up or wearing something that you're enthusiastic about immediately immediately changed his whole outlook. And then I've got people um, who want to start dressing, who amazingly have sort of seen my stuff and just see how I live and all of that in my stuff, and they want to try kind of emulate that or have a bit of that themselves and ask me to commission pieces. And it's like, well, of course, and it's really, really nice being able to. The thing about bespoke, it's a really intimate process. You end up being, a form of counselor, like a hairdresser almost, but also it's a really intimate thing because you are dealing with someone's body, and everyone has their imperfections and their insecurities, and it's sort of working with that. And where you start and where you finish is never quite where you think it's going to be. So it's always a fun one to go through the journey of bespoke with someone. Although I hate the overuse of that phrase, a journey, but it is really a sort of partnership, a partnership of stitches. There we go. That sounds like a good phrase. Yeah, let's go with that. Partnership of stitches.
Great. I'm going to ask you two more questions and then we'll go back into the chat. So you've been phenomenally successful on social media with coming up to 500,000 followers on Instagram. How would you ascribe what's the secrets of your online success?
Well, I would say there isn't really a secret. I've never wanted or sought fame or attention. Believe it or not, people say, I must do it for attention. It's like, if I did it for attention, I'd do something which required a lot less effort, hard work, and it's like it was a lot cheaper. Because we could say, oh, making your own clothes, you must save so much money. No, but you love it, so you do it. It's like some people love their dogs or their kids. I love making things, and being genuine, being genuine, because people are savvy enough, generally speaking, to spot fake people or social media bizarreness a mile off. Because there is a lot of that, unfortunately. But I think that's society as a whole. Just because it's on social media, it's still the same in real life. So, it's kind of like a town square environment. But in terms of success, it's just I do what I do. I post what I like, and that's it really. That there really isn't the secret. And people say, "Oh, you're branding," and this is like branding. What do you mean branding? Because you can go all, and people have. You go all the way through my Instagram. You go right back to the beginning, and it's me just posting like silly selfie things when I was at school. You can see the journey. Once again, using that phrase, you can see the sort of path I've taken. Uh, from then to here, I'm not hiding any steps. I'm not, covering up bad things that I've made, because I think it's so important to keep those first few projects and things like that. So it's something you can always look back on and go, oh my God, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Rather than throwing it away, it's kind of that reminder of, do that person proud, do the smaller version of you proud, as it were. So that's a great thing to do. And yeah, just don't take it all so seriously, I think, is another one. I think brands and people that do things very well are those that are just genuine and not very serious, because there's enough serious stuff going on that social media doesn't have to be like that. There's places for it, but for me, I'm like, it doesn't really matter.
I think a lot of makers find fostering that kind of online following a chore, and I think often that comes across in the delivery. I think there's something very freeing about just doing what you enjoy, and there's an authenticity that comes with that as well.
Yeah, and I've been helped by the fact that I have sort of gone viral a couple of times with things that I've done, but I've never sought it, and I know that it's something that creators and people need now, because it's the way the marketing is and everything, and the algorithm we are so subject to. But I think having loads of followers isn't the same as having people that follow you, if that makes sense. People will, long term dedicated followers will always be there for you, and for what you do. And if you just think that everything's a milestone, I mean, all 500 odd thousand or all 500,000 people that follow me, I'm not expecting them to order from me, and I do not want them to, because I would never, I just never get anything done. So it's that thing of, even if you've got a few thousand followers, as long as they're dedicated followers who like what you do and are there for you and what you do, that's worth more than millions.
Yeah. This touches on a question we had earlier in the chat, but you've used your platform to talk about gay rights and some of the discrimination that you've had to overcome. How important do you think it is to use these public platforms to challenge bigotry? And are you conscious of being a role model for the next generation of queer makers?
I mean, make me sound old. That's fine. No. For me, it's bizarre, because I still feel like I'm completely learning and like a novice and don't know anything. And then I find myself, lecturing at the London College of Fashion. I'm like, what am I doing here? What if someone finds out that I'm here? Or here I am presenting here going, I hope no one finds out and tells me off. Like, I've got to get over that, I think. But I think the thing about that is to use your. It's a choice. I think that if you want to speak out on stuff, speak out on stuff. Or things that are personal to me, of course I'm going to speak out about it, and about various things and injustices, because I want to. But don't feel that just because you have a lot of followers, it's your job. You're not the news. You're not a politician. What can I do? And it's very, very draining because you're trying to support people, but because you're in a position where anyone can then contact you or sort things or vent or whatever, it's in a disproportionate feedback loop where you'll put out something positive and supportive that you deem as positive and supportive, and those that don't or don't like it, then all of them can sort of so it's a really tricky position to do. And sometimes it's water off a duck's back, and sometimes, especially with my proposal video, I had to block and delete about 2,000 odd comments and people just because of the vitriol that got flung my way. And I was like, oh yeah, social media can be like that sometimes, but so can the newspapers and people on the news. It's no great difference. But because I'm just one person, I'm not a company. But it's just me. I run it all. I don't have any assistants or anything. You're always talking directly to me. Although no, I do have an assistant, but she's online and just helps with emails, because my brain is useless at those sorts of things. I think speak up if you feel comfortable to, or if you're in a position where you know enough about a subject to talk about it. And if you don't know enough to talk about it, platform people that do know what they're talking about. So we're saying, oh, why are you talking about this? Because I don't understand it. And also, who am I? I'm not a politician that can do anything about it. I'm just a person dressing up, making my own little things, trying to make rent. I don't need the mental headache of having to have a stance on everything. I have a stance, but I can't necessarily risk my own mental health or even my own safety, because over things that I posted in the past of support of various charities or rights or Black Lives Matter and things like that, I get threats sometimes because people are like that. But then people saying stuff on television or in newspapers get the same thing. So I suppose you've made it in a way if people are if people are being that way. But I try to make my spaces that I have a really welcoming front room. Because I don't like the term safe space, because it can sometimes give people the wrong impression. It's like the front room. Come into the front room. It's chill. Would you like some tea, coffee, a juice, and some cake? That's kind of the atmosphere I wish to create. One of just the world is a lot going on right now. In fact, what was really phenomenal is I got messages from people in Ukraine who were being bombed out and in bunkers and things like that. And everyone on social media was talking about the war. And I was as well. But then I started to find that it was just a bit too much. And I'm not on news feed. So I then kind of went back to just doing my content as normal, and raising money in different ways and everything. And I got messages from people saying, I love looking at what you do because I can suddenly escape everything and enjoy your content or your little videos or some of my silly stuff, and it could just take them out of the fact they're going through the worst thing they're ever going to go through. So social media can also be a place of escape, and to be constantly talking about something means that the people that are actually in it can never escape it themselves.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that must have been quite heartwarming to hear that from
it was bizarre
situation.
In a way, because I'm thinking, who am I to? I mean, what? It's really hard. It's really quite difficult to quantify the sort of following I've got. And then I started looking. I have more followers than the population of Barbados.
Wow.
That's mad. That's insane. That's a little crazy. And I'm like, okay, fine. but from all over the world, from all backgrounds, which is fantastic. It really is, and it means that I'm then exposing people of various different cultures to all sorts of different things, which I think is so wonderful, and it really does help build a sense of community, which I love about the internet, because I wouldn't have found my. Oh, we're getting some sun now, aren't we? There we go. Oh.
It's fine.
No, nothing I can do about that currently. Wait, I'll put a bit of embroidery for you to hide that, to cover up the sun. There we go. That's a bit better. Lost my thread, which is very reminiscent of me anyway.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think like a lot of people on similar journey, that word again to yourself, where kind of in that progressive space, you're kind of pioneers in a way, and hopefully making it easier for those that will be following you in the future, but not to put too much pressure or responsibility on you to have to kind of shoulder that burden, but hopefully it'll just happen naturally.
Oh yeah, and more often than not, it's something I don't mind doing. But sometimes, it's just a lot to be taking on. And after all, we're all just human, trying to sort of get along on this, as I said before, floating little blue marble. And once you put everything in that kind of perspective, everything kind of goes, oh yeah, why are we worrying about this particular thing?
Yes, and to look out for ourselves along the way. I've got a couple of other questions I'll say for the end, but let's go back into the chat. Biz, have we got any more questions?
Yeah, we can keep going to questions in the comments anytime. A few here. One, which I think is very timely if anyone's in the scoop on this, but with Bridgerton Part 2 coming out this week, someone was asking about has, films and TV shows like Bridgerton and others, and that kind of popularity, I think around the Regency period specifically, has that made a little bit of difference about how the public views you when you go out to get groceries or when you're out and about? Have you seen a difference with that or not as much?
So it's been a bit interesting because people sometimes say, "Oh, Bridgerton," I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But it's just another thing for people to sometimes comment. For ages, it was Harry Potter, and sometimes Sherlock Holmes, and people try to pick some like people in the moment. If you're going to comment, bizarre and rude anyway, so don't take much stock in it. But at least it's closer. And yeah, Bridgerton's fine and fun. And people said, "Well, don't you hate it? This is historically inaccurate." It's not trying to be. So why would I hate it for something it's not trying to do? Yes, I've made a video talking about the costumes, but here's the thing: people are like, "Oh, you're just critiquing them." No. What I was saying is that what if it was actually set in 1810? Well, it opens up, I think, 1810, 1811. I'm going, okay, here's what they're wearing. Great. The designers did a wonderful job. But what would they actually have worn? So it's not, I think it's an important thing to point out. But a problem with it is it's people's media literacy, where people think it is history. And I've heard from people that people have used Bridgerton examples in history essays and things. But people did that with the Tudors. People did that with Downton Abbey. So it's nothing new. I think it's great because it's bringing more people to a period of history or a style of history, which I think is great. And anything that gets people involved or interested in history is always going to be a win from me, except Rain, and except that awful. Was it the BBC version of? Was it BBC that did that version of War and Peace where everything was just awful? Yeah. So apart from that, those two, fine with it. But it's that thing of people expect it to be stuffy or something. It's like, for goodness sake, we're all just playing dress up. And after all, in film and TV, there's this notion which I know makes sense in some aspect, but it's almost a bit too pushy. That thing of the clothing must tell a story. And it's like, why can't clothes kind of, it's like, this person is sad, they must be wearing black and it must be raining. And I'm going, no, no, no. I want to see someone wearing a beautiful floral dress having the worst day of their life on a sunny day. You know, maybe get the actors to act and the script to do its job, rather than going, we need to show this person's free, therefore they'll never wear a hat. And I'm going, that's lazy. You know, how would someone of that period or something have shown they're a free person? Probably through what they did and said, not through not wearing a hat. It's just ham-fisted. And once you start seeing it in things, you're going, this person's the heroine, so they're going to have their hair down, wandering through a field of wheat wearing white. Lo and behold, you know.
Very true. Very true. I'm the worst to sit with. All my friends know. I'll just be looking at, do you see the buttons there? Yes.
My favorite thing to do, my favorite thing to do is not to look out for accuracies, because from pretty much all the costume designers I've talked to, a lot of them, it's like, oh, if we could do it period accurate, we would, or we'd love to. The makers especially, and designers want to put their own stamp on it and everything. I totally understand that. So it's not like I'm going for people, and I'd love to design something one day, but I don't think there's anyone that would work with me. I don't know. One thing I love looking for is the modern stuff they forgot to hide.
Yes.
Light switches, plugs, smoke alarms, and like satellite dishes are the worst offenders. I can't remember what I was watching. I think it was maybe Vanity Fair, or something, that the BBC one that was done a while ago, and she's sitting there in this very plain attic, and he opens the door and the thing pans down, and there's a full-on cable to a smoke alarm in the middle of the ceiling. And I'm like, what is this?
Brutal.
Or another one is, opens the door, full-on light switch there. Full-on light switch. I'm just going, come on. But my favorite one recently was the Napoleon film. There's a hypocritical scene, which describes a lot of the movie anyway, but there was this hypocritical scene between Wellington and Napoleon, and they're on the HMS Victory, which is fine. They're not going to build the Bellerophon, are they? And right behind them is the fire suppression hose system, and I'm like, in frame, like, put something in front of it, put anything, or edit it out. I mean, because a lot of CGI was used, they could CGI out that, or have a guard standing there, or a bookcase, not a fire suppression system with a little red toggle thing on. I'm like, okay. So yeah, that's the sort of thing that bothers me.
When it comes to your work and in terms of construction, are you like, what's the ratio between, you know, patterns that you're sourcing? Are they original, or are you kind of retro engineering and kind of taking apart or trying to figure out the puzzle of a piece that you've seen in a collection? You know, what's in terms of your practice and how you're constructing and building things? What's that look like?
Yeah. So there are pattern drafting systems and things out there. They're tricky to use, and that's sort of what I base things on, because you can't just buy patterns for this stuff, because that's not how it works. That's not how bespoke tailoring works. It's drafting. You've got to draft it, you've got to drape it, you've got to work it out. And what's helpful is that these shapes are much more kind of organic than the sort of mid-Victorian stuff, where they get really into the mathematical basis of doing everything to the point where it's so overcomplicated. But that's the thing, these books came out mainly for sort of amateurs or journeyman tailors and things like that, as opposed to, if you went into the tailoring profession like you would now, you get taught on the job. So they didn't really bother writing things down. So I sort of developed my own sort of system with things involving draping and drafting. But there is a couple of people out there who take things apart, which I cannot stand. There's no point. There's no need. You look at Janet Arnold and everything that she did without messing up anything. And in fact, Janet Arnold, Pattern and Fashion, fantastic. Buy all their stuff immediately. Go and support them at the School of Historical Dress, run by the spectacular Jerry Tiramani, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman doing the Lord's work, honestly. Absolutely spectacular. So there isn't really a one-stop shop, and it has just required a lot of work and patience, and drafting and getting my eye in and developing in a way my house style as well. So as much as things are historically accurate, there's also certain things I like to do, which you will only know if you become a client, type thing. But you know, there are various things that there are various things you can work with. But in terms of with historical styling, you can go, oh, this is historically accurate, and it's also stylistically good. So there's various tweaks and things that you can do, which is always within period. But to say that sweeping statements kind of didn't exist, because fashion was, yes, around, but there was also regional and you know, things that looked very appropriate for the country or for the town, or looked different between different countries. And some were very fast acting on this and went, oh yeah, let's do that. And the back sizes are different for French uniforms than they are for English uniforms. And then you get to the officers and they're doing a weird thing there with their tails, you know. So there's as much variety as there is people buying stuff.
Really cool. And in terms of inspiration with work, are you kind of sticking more regionally, domestically, or someone had a question about, are you gonna, you know, if we look at the Regency period as our example, are you looking roughly same time period in other countries or other areas around the globe and seeing what they're doing at the same time, and kind of does that play into it, or do you kind of more stick to this side of the globe?
Well, mainly it's a case of I wouldn't mind making things from other cultures, as long as it makes sense. That's the thing. So I wouldn't, for example, make something, you know, historically Chinese for someone that isn't, you know, that doesn't have that as part of their culture. I'd be like, that's not quite right for me. But things like, you know, Regency people wearing all sorts of stuff, they did because of diplomacy and fashion, and it was all very nebulous. You know, and you have different fashion plates and documents and things from various countries, and you can see that sort of stuff as well. It very much depends from commission to commission, but I do tend to stick with sort of Western Europe in my own designs for things that I make for myself. But then I'll be inspired by the fact that, oh, it's much hotter. What were Westerners wearing in India or South America, you know? So I'll then look at that, the sort of wearing more sort of tropical clothing, and then, you know, for very cold clothing, you think, well, what were people wearing further north? So it tends to be more of a weather thing as opposed to a cultural thing, because at this period, cultures are you know, borrowing from each other all over the place. Why do we? So here's a fun one. Why do you start wearing tiaras? Why did women start wearing tiaras? Well, because we went over to India and Turkey and saw Maharajas and things wearing turbans with jewels and things in their hair. Saw the diplomats that came over, and people said, "Oh, putting jewels and things in their hair, that sounds great. What if we like did that on a more stable term?" So we took that from them, and then you know, other cultures, but you know, it's very much a cultural melting pot, and I think that's the way you kind of need to look at it. But nowadays there are kind of limits about the difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. Whereas for me, my favorite building in the world is the Royal Pavilion. You might look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's so much a cultural appropriation." It's like, well, no, it's not, because they're not making fun of it. It's a huge appreciation of the culture and the style from a collection of silks and pots. So it's a bit like saying, I'm going to design this entire house based on this tea set that I own. That's pretty much how the place was sort of put together in a way. But it was that whole thing of, oh my gosh, we really love this. What can we do now? Sort of thing. Yeah, it's a magical, magical place.
Really cool. I've seen it on the outside, but the one time I visited, I couldn't go in. So it's on my list to do. I must go in.
Well, you must come to my ball, my next ball.
See, okay, so here's I'll do this one question because then I think Daniel's got a few to end it. But for people who want to get more involved in this community or want to come to your balls, but their wardrobes don't reflect that, they don't have the means to either make it themselves or they don't have the space to do it or the pocket money to do it, how would you help someone get more involved in your community?
YouTube is a wonderful resource. I'm going to be putting up more videos. Really good friend of mine, Bernadette, puts out some wonderful stuff. Carolina and we're all friends. We're literally all community. We have literally been group chatting about the fact that I'm doing this. So yeah, we all talk to each other. We all like each other pretty much. No, and there are resources out there. The internet exists. Google is free. Use it. Go, chop up the old tablecloth. Find an old bed sheet. Use that. That's how I started. I started sort of drafting and things and everything, and I didn't have any scraps. Couldn't really, I'd spent all the money on the really cheap velvet, and I was like, oh, I can't, I want to kind of pattern this or something. So I used my first draft and things from an old bed sheet, and then I used that as the lining. Is it wrong? Yes. Would I do it again? No. Would I necessarily recommend it? Maybe not. But it's that thing of work to the means that you've got. To go to a ball, you don't have to have a great big gorgeous spectacular silk. You can wear a very plain good cotton, because that was highly fashionable at the time. We look at that now as cheap because it's gotten cheaper. Back then it was expensive and a sign of simple lines and neoclassicism. So there's so many resources out there. Etsy is a great resource. There are so many amazing creators and designers and makers online for very much spanning the budget spectrum. But you've also got to remember that if you want something cheap, you're probably going to get not the best quality, especially something that's being handmade or made for you. It's then also you need to question yourself about respecting the maker's time, and the fact that, they're charging a lot. It's like, yes, but that's because they've learned to make it, and then you're paying for their time and you're paying for the skills, because you could pay anyone 20 quid to make something, 20 quid an hour to make something, but to pay someone 20 quid who can do it to a high level, that kind of doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Biz, and thank you everyone who's asked a question. And sorry if we haven't had a chance to ask your question. We will get a transcript of the chat and we'll forward that on to Zach, so at least he's had a sight of all of the questions afterwards. I'm just going to say a few words before I give Zach the last word, and I'm just going to spotlight myself. So thank you again all for coming, and thanks especially to those who gave a donation when they signed up. We really appreciate it. We are an independent charity and we rely on funding from a variety of sources. We would say if you're not already a member, that's the best way to support us, because not only does it help with our financial sustainability, but it also helps build our member community, and that's really important to us. We feel we're creating this movement, this momentum of people, like-minded people who are interested in the continuation of these skills into the future. And yeah, that's really central to our work and our direction. So if you're not already a member, please do consider signing up. Thank you. I also mentioned at the beginning the fact that we've got an exciting award coming up in partnership with the Costume Society. This is a great partnership we started in January, and we've already awarded 3 bursaries, including 2 in historical costume, which we're very excited about, to new entrants to those crafts. So we've got Maya and Katie, who are doing some fantastic historic costume making training as part of that. But in a couple of weeks, we've got the launch of our new Fashion Textile Maker of the Year award, which celebrates a heritage craftsperson who's made an outstanding contribution to fashion textile crafts over the past year. It recognizes a contribution that's far beyond the ordinary, based on a proven dedication to a particular set of fashion textile skills. The award is accompanied by a £2,000 prize and will be presented at a high-profile winners' reception at Elton Palace in November. The award opens on Monday, the 24th of June, and there's going to be a couple of other related awards available as well, including Leather Worker of the Year, supported by the British Leather Industry Development Trust, and also Young Embroiderer of the Year and Young Leather Worker of the Year, supported by the Broderers Company and the Leather Sellers Company, respectively. So I can't believe 90 minutes has absolutely flown by. I don't know about you, but I could carry on this conversation all night, but we probably shouldn't. So I'm just going to ask you to wrap up by telling us something you're particularly excited about in the future. It could be a short term or long-term future. What are you looking forward to?
Uh, gosh. Okay. Well, oh, interestingly, the 24th of June is also my birthday. So doubly you should get involved with that. So I'm excited to do. Well, I'm actually next week. I'm quite excited because for my birthday I will be in New York seeing my other half, my fiance, performing in his Broadway debut in Broadway Bears. So really excited about that. Raising as much money as possible for HIV and AIDS charities, and yeah, no, so really excited about that, but also really excited for the next ball I'm creating in January 2025, which is going to be a Burns Night theme because it'll be on the 25th of January, and it will also be so it's 25/01/25, which I think is numerically wonderful, as well as it is the 222nd anniversary of Burns Night. So that's something I'm putting together, and it was honestly a joy this time round. And now the initial fear of that one has happened. I can really enjoy the next one, so I'm excited to make the next one better than the first.
Fantastic. Congratulations on your engagement. Lots to
Thank
look
you.
forward to. And as Gilly's just said in the chat, we really do need more balls.
Yes,
That's a
I
good
agree.
note to end on. So thank you so much, Zach. Thank you, everyone. It's been fantastic. The recording will be available on our website afterwards for anyone who wants to rewatch it. I know I certainly will. But for now, we'll leave you to get on with your evenings, and thank you. Bye-bye.